Alright folks, here we are with level 3 rhythm counting, and this is where we are dealing with the dotted quarter note. Now you may remember that the dot behind the note adds half the value of the note. So if you have a half note, which is worth 2, you put a dot behind it, and we have a dotted half note. Half of 2 is 1, and that's why the dotted half note gets 3. So in this case, the quarter note is worth 1, of course. The dot behind it is worth 1/2 of a beat. So the dotted quarter altogether as a unit is worth 1 1/2 beats. Let's go back to our 3 rules of rhythmic counting up at the top. And we start with every measure begins with 1. Now, this is the tricky thing. This is worth 1 1/2 beats. So it uses all of beat 1 and it uses half of beat 2, but it has not finished beat 2. So we're not done with beat 2. We can't go on and call this note here beat 3 yet. This note has to be the and of 2. There we go with the and symbol right there. So the beat 2 is here. You can think about beat 2 as being the dot, and it's the first half of beat 2 is here. This is the second half of beat 2 on this single eighth note. Again, the single eighth note has the flag on it. Now we are done with beat 2, and therefore we can call this beat 3. Of course, this is a quarter note, so we can go right on and call this beat 4. The rhythm here will be 1 and 3, 4. Let's look at measure 2. Same thing, every measure begins with 1. Again, this is a dotted quarter note here, so whatever comes next is dependent on how long this note is. A beat and a half makes this all of beat 1 and half of beat 2. Therefore, this becomes the and of 2. Here's a single eighth note. It finishes off beat 2. We can call this 3. This is only an eighth note now, so we cannot go on to beat 4 yet. We have to call that the and of 3. Now we've finished beat 3 with these 2 eighth notes together, and we call that beat 4. Here's a bar line, starts with 1. Again, from previous measures, what we've learned here, this is the and of 2. Then we're going to finish with 3, and beat 4, of course, is the second half of this half note. Bar line starts with 1. The and of 2, because this is a dotted quarter note, and then beat 3, and then of course we have to call this, in parentheses, beat 4. Now let's look down here in measure 5. Measure 5, we of course start on beat 1, but this is a quarter note, not a dotted quarter note, so it uses up the entire first beat and only the first beat, so this must be beat 2. Now, this dotted quarter note here starts on beat 2, uses all of beat 2, uses the first half of beat 3, but not the whole beat 3. So, beat 3 begins here, but this eighth note is still part of beat 3. It's the second half of beat 3. We call that the and of 3. The eighth note finishes off all of beat 3 because that's the second half of beat 3, and therefore that is beat 4. That's a quarter note and it completes the 4/4 measure. Measure 6, beat 1 at the beginning, 1, and these are eighth notes, so we're calling them and. 1 and this is of course 2. What we learned in measure 5 over here, this is all of beat 2, half of beat 3, and then this finishes off beat 3. This is the and of 3 right here. This of course would be beat 4. Again, bar line resets. We begin every measure with 1. This is a quarter note, so this is still beat 2, just like you learned in level 2 of rhythmic counting. Here's the and, 3, and then we have the dotted quarter note here. Takes up all of beat 3, the first half of beat 4, and therefore this finishes with the and of 4. Beat 4 begins in here. And then we have a bar line, so we start with every measure begins with 1. This, of course, is the dotted quarter note. We've learned by now that this is the and of 2, beat 2 begins here in the middle on the dot. Then this would be beat 3, and then of course beat 4 there.